Does it look like everyone's here?
Not all of our members yet, but we do have a quorum for the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee.
Okay. Okay. See Melissa, Jason, Matt. We don't have Christy yet.
Jeff Carlson is just trying to finish a phone call. He'll be on shortly.
Okay, let's just give it like 2. Oh, there's Christy Ferrantella.
We can go ahead, Dawn, if you want. We know that some of our members aren't coming, so we have
Okay.
we're good.
Great, Mary. I will call the April 13th Select Board meeting to order. Excuse me, let me just get my script. As a preliminary matter, I, Don Holgate, will chair of the Nantucket Select Board. Let me confirm that all members of the board are present and can hear me. Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Jason Bridges.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
And we have a number of staff members present as well. Holly Backus.
Present.
Libby Gibson.
Present.
Vincent Murphy.
Here.
Ken Beaugrand.
Here.
Chuck Larson.
Here.
Graham Durovich.
Here.
William Pittman.
Here.
Roberto Santamaria.
Here.
And I this open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirements of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. Are we going to have public comments available at this meeting? Okay.
No, this is really intended to be a workshop meeting.
Okay, we will not have public comments this evening, but this will be recorded. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to share the screen of your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting agenda materials have been provided to the body, are posted on the town website. Please follow along with those materials. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly to help generate accurate minutes. There will not be any votes taken. And please take care to identify yourself as we go into the workshop. I will turn it over to Mary Longacre to call her board to her committee to order, and then to Arcadis from there.
Thank you, Don. I'm Mary Longacre, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. We are following the same governor's order that Don just read, but I will recognize the members that we have here present today. Please answer in the affirmative when I call your name. Gary Beller.
Present.
Sarah Boyce.
Present.
Graham Durovich.
Present, and for the record, I'm here in my capacity as a member of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee and not as a staff member.
Thank you very much, Graham. Matt Fee.
Here.
Ian Golding.
Here.
Fritz McClure. Fritz, can you hear us?
Here.
Thank you. And Mary Longacre here. So that is the members present. I believe that's 7.
He's still waiting to be let in. That's right.
So I guess to Kate, Dawn, with your permission.
Oh, yes, thank you. And sorry, Graham, that was my mistake. Go ahead, Kate.
Great, thank you all. We're Very excited to be here and for the opportunity to partner with all of you today. So I just want to make an introduction of our team. But today we are talking about Baxter Road and the feasibility assessment. So before I do a brief introduction of our team, I wanted to just quickly introduce our CADIS. We work in multiple sectors, including water, wastewater, stormwater, water management and resilience, environmental restoration, infrastructure and mobility. We're a global leader in planning, engineering, and implementing climate resilience, and have been working with communities to adapt to natural hazards since our inception in the 1888. We have planners, scientists, engineers, and other experts on staff. So we have brought some of those experts with us today. I'm Kate Edwards, and I'm a principal engineer with Arcadis. I have several years of experience in stormwater planning, design, permit compliance, flood studies, and planning for climate adaptation, most recently with our work for the city of Boston. I have a degree in environmental engineering and a professional license in civil engineering. Also with us today is Dr. Karen Bolter. She's an urban and coastal resiliency expert who has a PhD in geosciences, geology, and geography. Her GIS spatial analysis of people, cities, and the environment inform data-driven climate resilience. She's worked as a professor and as a planner in local government, so she has a unique range of perspectives. Irene Watts is a senior coastal modeler and has an undergraduate degree in ocean engineering with a minor in geology, a master's in civil engineering, and a PhD in ocean engineering. She served as coastal engineer for the New England District of the Army Corps, and her work included studies on tidal inlets, nearshore morphology, and sediment transport throughout New England. So she brings a lot of expertise, particularly in this area. We also have Ryan Brong with us today. He's been aiding the project efforts by compiling all of the document resources. You probably got the list in an easily referenced format, and he'll be helping us out, kind of monitoring the chat and discussion Q&A session. And also able to join us today was Jen Lockmeyer, who is the project director and principal vice president, sorry, at Arcadis, our area leader, and she's been along the ride for this project as well. So today's discussion, so I'm not sure if you all know why you're here, but we're going to be talking about Baxter Road and the facility feasibility assessment. Our team is fairly new to Nantucket. We're an independent consultant, and we bring expertise in the coastal resilience space. We're here to kind of talk a little bit about what we know so far, but mostly to hear from you. So you all have been doing some important work to make this situation better, and now is a good point to try and find some alignment and a path forward. And we have talked to a couple of other groups thus far. So we'll talk a little bit about the scope of work in just a minute, but today we're focusing on what is this project and what have we done so far? What should we name this project? What should the mission statement be? Risks we've seen on Baxter Road, your perspectives, priorities, and preferences, and how to move forward with a short and long-term vision solutions. And then, okay, so our goals for today are really, we're calling this a listening tour, this first set of meetings. And again, this is the third of those, that tour. So we're hearing your input, trying to share with you what we know so far, gather some feedback, data suggestions and recommendations, confirm our data review list, define for you what some of those alternatives being considered are, and begin to create the framework for a consensus that works for everybody. And I'm going to turn it over to Karen at this point.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks everyone. It's good to talk to you guys. And I just wanted to kind of introduce our ground rules. You know, we definitely want, we want to listen, but also for you guys to listen actively and contribute to meeting goals by sharing ideas, asking questions. We want everything to be really positive and also fun. So we have some polling software called Poll EV. And if this doesn't work for you, it's not mandatory. Like I said, it's just for fun, and there's, you know, some word clouds and maps. And so if you would like to participate, we would love that. And it should be pretty easy if you use your phone or another browser. You just go to polleb.com and you would enter the name of our presentation, which is kbolter833. And so when you do that, you should see this map that says, where do you spend most of your time when you're in Nantucket, whether it's where you live, work, vacation, or, you know, just a place of interest that you want to basically, you know, either click on this map, or if it's on your phone, you can just, you should be able to just drop a pin. So we'll see those pins coming live. I'm doing it too, just to make sure. So it's it's Bolter. Do you guys need to see that again? Can you, maybe you can put this in the chat, Ryan? Full EV.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat.
So it's
Thank
going to
you,
be kbolter, and it's not case sensitive. So just type in kbolter833. So I just got it to work. It works for me. So if you're able to, I just dropped a pin, and I can see it. Oh, great. Look how many pins are dropping. I'm going to clear mine. Okay. So this is just kind of testing out the tool and how we use it. And also I love maps. So it's interesting to see this nice spread across the map. I'll just give it another few seconds. I see pins that are still dropping. I think this is relevant too, because in our previous meetings, we're focusing on Baxter Road, and we're being really careful to keep it separate from the CRP. But what we've been hearing from stakeholders is, why aren't you looking, you know, considering the rest of the island, especially with things like sand budget? So great, we have a lot of pins here. Well, it's not too late. You can still drop pins, and we save this if you want the map. So next I will kind of talk a little bit about the geology, and I want to go through this quickly, but just kind of get us into perspective of talking about the risks, and there's erosion, and there's storm surge, and how those are exacerbated by sea level rise, and just thinking about the big picture, looking at Earth's geologic history. You know, in our human recorded observations of sea level has been relatively stable, right, the past few thousand years. But if you go back to 125 years ago, which was the last interglacial, that's the time between the ice ages, sea level was actually 20 to 30 feet higher. The temperature was 1 to 2 degrees Celsius warmer, because a lot of the ice was melted, right, in Greenland and Antarctica. You fast forward to about 20,000 years ago, that was our last ice age. And this is kind of what led to Nantucket forming. And so we see at this time that because there was so much land ice, sea levels were about 400 feet lower. Look how fat Florida is. So it's it really puts things into perspective to think about, you know, these dramatic changes have happened before. They've never happened this quickly, and because of, you know, something like an industrial revolution, but we don't need to talk about that now. I just kind of wanted to think about that broader context, and also think about kind of tipping points, because on the next slide, I wanted to show you the sea level rise projections that we're using for this project going out to 2100. And that, you know, we see those sea level rise projection curves that go up, you know, pretty smoothly. But in reality, there are tipping points and there are thresholds where you reach a certain, you know, some kind of ice sheet collapse, right? And we see like pulses. But yeah, so what you're looking at here for Nantucket, MHHW stands for mean higher high water, which is, there's 2 high tides in the day, right? So it's the higher of those, it's the average. And so already today, that high tide is about 1.5 feet above the datum that we use, NAVD 88. And so looking out to 2030, it will be another 1.5 feet higher. And and out to 2100, it could get as high as 9.7 feet higher. So those are the high projections from the Massachusetts statewide climate projections. And that's what we're using for the project. With abundance of caution, it's definitely good to look on the higher end. And yeah, and by the way, thank you so much everyone that filled out the survey. We mentioned sea level rise projections in there just to get an idea of what you guys estimated for these projections. One thing, as you're going out into the future, they call it like a fat tail, right? Because the uncertainty increases, there's a larger range. And so connecting that sea level rise to erosion and the impacts to Baxter Road, we're looking at all of the factors that affect that bluff erosion. So wave energy, coastal slope, beach width. Irene is going to talk a lot more about those later, but just thinking about, okay, sea level rise in a lot of ways is a threat multiplier. So all of these different impacts are going to be exacerbated with higher average ocean levels. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kate for a project overview.
Excellent. So what we're really looking at here is kind of the steps or scope of our work. It covers Baxter Road and the related public infrastructure from Sankaty Lighthouse to Butterfly Lane in Sconset, including adjacent private parcels. The first step has really been to gather and review existing conditions and information that led up to those conditions to inform the analysis and the engagement with you all, including previous planning studies, prior analysis, monitoring reports, prior Conservation Commission filings. These are kind of part of our discussion today. The second step, which really runs throughout the whole project, is to work with stakeholders, so that's you, to start to reach a consensus on level of risk that is acceptable or tolerable, consequences of alternatives that may be feasible, and consequences of inaction, and the path forward based on technically feasible alternatives. And we're going to be doing that through a series of meetings. The third step is to assess the feasibility of those alternatives, and we've begun to lay some of those out from our initial work and in our initial meetings here. And finally, we'll be delivering a summary of findings and recommendations. So when we talk about gaining consensus, we're starting to look at how do we gain consensus or reach consensus on the best path forward to prepare for the changing conditions that Karen was kind of just talking about in the future of Baxter Road. We want to talk a little bit about how you all want to prioritize time, resources, and other investments. How to create a plan that is both cost effective and acceptable to the community. So just starting to lay out the groundwork for that as we talk through things today. Today we're going to start off and looking to employ active and empathetic listening, and we're going to hope to carry this through our focus group work, meaning we want to keep the speaker from feeling or becoming defensive, trying to avoid asking super direct questions or arguing, and just laying the groundwork here for a positive space, which in part translates to using I feel statements and not you statements. And as we kind of make our points, just being mindful of those things. So I think next we have a poll. We know that the current title of the project on paper is Baxter Road Engineering Feasibility Assessment. And I know some folks are just calling it things like the Arcadis Baxter Road Study. So we really wanted to get, we'd like to have a better name for the project than that. And we want your input. So if you'd like to share with us what you think is a good name for the project through the polling, same polling that Karen did. Yep, I see some answers popping up. This is great. If you have other comments that aren't a name, that is fine. You can put them in the chat as well. I like some of these. These are great, and you'll see they start to scroll through, but as Karen said, we will be able to capture all of the answers you're providing.
These are awesome. A lot of creativity.
I see Sarah's question. Sarah, it is Baxter Road from, what did I say, Sankaty down to Butterfly Lane, Sankaty Light down to Butterfly Lane, and then the adjoining parcels. So we think of it as mostly the road and the parcels that have an address as sort of on Baxter Road, if that's helpful.
This one is great.
I love these.
I love puns.
Awesome. All right. I did hear, I think at the CRAC meeting this morning that some of you all have to leave partway through this, so I want to move on to the next piece. But I like these names much better than sort of the boring feasibility assessment type name. So thank you. We'll get back to you and let you know. Similarly, here, we want to start to talk about a mission statement. For any of you who have been following along the CRP process, we have a project mission statement there. And what the mission really does is just ground us in our intent for the project and what we want to be thinking about as we open a meeting every time. And so this is something that we've put together. We have some comments from the other groups that we've been speaking with, and we want to kind of find some commonalities between comments among groups and then report back to you all on how the mission might sound different from what we've put forward here. So the Baxter Road feasibility assessment will create a community supported actionable roadmap to implementation of short and long-term solutions for the Baxter Road area that lessen the loss from storm surges and help the community adapt to rising seas and eroding coastlines. So this is something we've put out there, and would love to take some feedback if you all want to, let's see if I can, I don't know if we can use the raise hand function or if people want to let me know. Looking for my gallery here.
There is a raise hand function available, at least to me, so hopefully that's available to everyone, but the presenters can't see it.
Yes, so if you guys want to use the raise hand function, since we have so many people here, maybe I'll take some input or thoughts. We'll also take comments in the chat and capture those as well. But I should have said at the outset, this is a workshop setting. This is meant to be interactive, and if you can't get my attention because I can't see everybody on the same screen at any point during this, feel free to throw something in the chat and we'll you know, get our attention any way you can. That's fine. We want people to interact and we want to hear you today. So any thoughts on this mission statement? Any words that you like or that are bothering you or that may have meaning that is too vague, things like that. We've heard some things like that. Nobody? Oh my goodness. Sarah.
So I really appreciate that it's kind of a multi-layered, you know, lessening the loss from storm surge and helping the community adapt to rising seas and eroding coastlines. But I had just a sort of general question of, is adaptation to rising seas the only solution that's going to be considered? I know, you know, through the other processes we've talked about adaptation, retreat, managed retreat, you know, like just lots of different possibilities. And I was just wondering if, because it's in the mission, is that the only kind of moving forward what's being considered?
I can answer that, Kate. I think Sarah, just to clarify what we mean by adaptation, like those, all of the umbrella of adaptation options are under that you mentioned. So protect, adapt, retreat, elevate, retreat, like all those, any solution is adaptation, even if it's do nothing. That's one of the adaptations. So it's an umbrella, but maybe we can think about clarifying that. So it's a good comment. Thank you.
Mary?
I appreciate that it says both short and long-term solutions, that this is not going to be something far off in the future, but hopefully something that addresses the current and near future as well as long-term.
Thanks, Mary. Holly?
Thanks. I just want to mention that I like the fact that you all have actionable roadmap for implementation, actually a clear path of how we're going to be able to accommodate this plan. So I like that. Thanks.
Great. To be fair, this is wonderful and positive feedback, but we will take negative as well if you have that, if you need it. If you need to get something off your chest, that's fine. Awesome. Thank you all. All right, so I think we can go to the next piece. We did send out a resources list, and Karen, if you can just flip to the next slide for just a second to show, it looks like this. It's immense, it's big, and then we also included a tab for an addition form. So we wanted to just get a poll and kind of understand how many of you have seen that and reviewed it and looked at it. So you can go back to the poll, sorry, Karen. Just wanted to make sure people have kind of seen it and understand that it exists. What we would like from this group, which we're calling more of the town group, so select board, town departments, Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, for you all, if you could get back to us with anything of significance that's missing. I think the 20th, did we say, Karen?
Yes.
The 20th. This is really, we'd like to get kind of concurrence that we have really important documentations. One of the challenges with the project is that it has such a long history. So we have mainly focused on some of the more recent history surrounding existing conditions, just primarily due to the time constraints within the project. So if there's something that A, doesn't exist in PDF format because it's from a long time ago, and B, is hard to get our hands on, if you could point us to that document and provide it to us, or tell us, you know, where the town, maybe Vince or somebody could help us get that, and also provide a summary of the key points of that document. I think we've gotten a lot of feedback from the other two groups and have a really good library here. So we're kind of going through this documentation to understand the history. So we appreciate any feedback there. And then I think, Karen, we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, before I hand it over to Irene to talk more about the technical parts of our work, just wanted to touch again on the surveys, because we did have the two groups that attended our stakeholder meetings on March 23rd. They completed the surveys as well. So of all of those voices and perspectives that we heard from the survey to the meetings, these are kind of the summary of them. You know, people, in terms of those adaptation choices, which is all the possible reactions to the hazards, there are concerns for all the voices to be heard, impartial analysis, thinking about some of the unintended consequences, and and looking more holistically at the town, like where are you prioritizing and why, and making sure that it's fair and equitable. We heard a lot about the sand sources and the sand budget, and where it comes from and how it's delivered, some issues, and also impacts, of course, to the tax base for Nantucket. And with the lighthouse, of course, there's the cultural preservation, there was beach access references. So we had a lot of opinions about these topics. And so we're really focusing on in coming to a consensus, kind of diving into these and finding something that works for everyone. And it is challenging, but we have a great plan to do it. So just beginning to reach consensus, we're looking at the future risks and those trade-offs. We're defining the feasibility of the alternatives. Irene will talk about that. Thinking about those potential unintended consequences. And really the last one, fostering a culture of cooperation and preparedness. You know, everybody has something at stake that it's really important for everyone to reach consensus, right? Each person that is involved here, they might have a different reason for wanting to reach consensus, but to make something happen, we have to do it. So we're going to work really hard on that. So yeah, I'll turn it over to Irene to talk more about those technical aspects.
Thank you, Karen. So the purpose of this section of the talk is just to orient ourselves to our area of interest and review some just basic concepts. I think everybody here is very familiar with the island, and I'm here to learn from you. If we could just go to the next slide. So the area of interest, as we've mentioned throughout the talk today, is Baxter Road, which is located on the southeast side of Nantucket Island. Moving forward, we see the configuration of the geotubes along shore and how it relates to the rest of the system. So the materials that comprise Nantucket shoreline are mainly sandy soils, and they are susceptible to coastal erosion. I think everybody here is aware of that. The erosive nature of the shoreline is documented in several different studies that we've been reviewing. Thank you very much for providing those. Shoreline and dune erosion rates are influenced at several different timescales, and I think that's important to think about and keep in mind, is that erosion is in response to the varying coastal processes that are involved between sea level rise, episodic events like storms and nor'easters, and that has an impact on the other erosional factors. One important factor that both sandy beach and dune erosion typically follows a pattern of erosion. So both from a storm perspective as well as a seasonal perspective, followed by a period of recovery. So you have that ability for the material to leave the beach and then come back on in the more quiescent summer months. So for example, the difference between a typical winter beach profile and summer profile, you're going to see that differences between. And then you have the component of sea level rise, and we're working to understand the relationship between the shoreline and sea level rise. And the other component to this system, and I like to look at it as a system, is stormwater runoff also impacts your erosion on the system itself. So it's something to keep in mind moving forward. So it's not just the beach, it's the beach, the cliff, and the relationship that society has with this system, because that impacts the rest of the system. So moving forward, there has been a history of moving back from the edge of the bluff. Historically, there have been instances of housing losses and retreats. This is a particular situation. We obtained this from the Inquirer and Mirror that show the garage at 99 Baxter being demolished in 2013. In this instance, the home was moved back from the cliff front. So we have an interesting timeline of events, and I like to look at things through time so that I understand how things have changed beyond just the seasonal thing. I think sometimes we can get so focused in on what happens between storm to storm or season to season, but looking back through almost a decadal scale here. On the top row, we have the mitigation events. So it starts in 2007 with the lighthouse being moved, and it runs all the way through 2018. And we see the different activities that have undertaken to address the erosion with the application for the tow stabilization. We have different approvals for tow stabilization, vegetation. And then on the bottom, you see the relationship between the storm events through time, starting with Tropical Storm Earl and moving all the way through several different blizzards and coastal flooding events. So it's just good to keep in mind how we have responded, I mean, the ubiquitous we, to these different storm events moving through time. So the Baxter Road geotubes are a form of tow stabilization. So the idea is that you're going to be stabilizing that base of the cliff so that it's not eroding and wasting from the top. So as the bluff starts to erode, you're going to have that the bluff face start to shear off. And the geotubes themselves were designed and installed between 2013 and 2015 along 7 houses. And it should be noted that it's also providing protection to the road, the infrastructure, and the homes further back. There was a proposal to expand this system to 4,000 feet along shore in 2018. The Preservation Society pays to install and maintain the geotubes, but there is an impact on the town itself. So on the right image, you can see this kind of cross section of how the geotubes are actually installed. So you're looking at the shoreline this way, as if you were standing on the beach next to the geotubes, and they're stacked at a 45-degree angle. And material is added and covered so that you maintain the aesthetics of the beach and provide material within the system so that it can erode and then accrete. This is the best thing the best tool that we have are field data, field monitoring, and that's how we understand how the system works from a quantitative manner. So on the left panel, we see these beach profiles, and they're shore perpendicular profiles that are survey lines. And so this is how we measure the beach and observe its responses to the winds and waves and changes in sea level. And we're going to focus on a couple of different transects through here. And this is all monitoring data that's being conducted through time by the Woods Hole Group. And these are 2 different beach profile surveys. So you can imagine yourself standing on the beach looking sideways. So these are actually all looking northwards. So 91 and 91 and a half, and those are just survey markers. And so what we can see here, starting in November 1994, the dashed line is the most seaward line. And moving forward through time to December 2001 in the pink hash, you can see that it's eroded at this particular location. Then moving forward to 2013 through June 2020, you can see that the erosion continues, but it starts to stand still by June 2020. And it's a similar behavior down below at 91 and a half. So we can see here that, you know, the structure is providing some level of protection here, and we're not seeing the erosion, but that may or may not continue moving forward. It should be noted that there's not a uniform time here. We've got several different years between 94, 2001, then it jumps to 2013, and then we have a series of months here between September 2019 and June 2020. So I just wanted to highlight that it's not an even progression of time. So that's something to keep in mind moving forward. I think I have one more slide on here. Oh, I have several more. I mentioned several studies have been undertaken to understand the system as a whole, and understand and quantify the erosion of the system. This is the Fema Coastal Erosion Hazard Mapping. It was a, what they were trying to do is take a look at LiDAR data and be able to project the response of the system in the future to 3 different time periods, 2030, 2050, and 2100. And what they did was make several different maps of what that erosion could be in the future based on a couple of different models that they have written. So we're going to zoom in here to our area of interest on the next slide, just to take a look at what it would look like. So again, we have 3 different areas. This is just this particular study. So in 2030, this particular study has projected the erosion back to this yellow line, and there's 2 homes that would be in that area eroding. And then further through time to 2050, we have these different structures. And then 2100, it's significantly increased through there. I think that's all I wanted to cover on this particular slide. The other element that's also really important is post-storm surveys. This is in addition to the regular monitoring that is conducted. These are really important to understand how the system responds to those storm events, those episodic events, and capture that erosion that occurred. And then looking forward into the future, see how much the beach has accreted as you move away from the more erosional portions of the year to the more accretionary summers. And I think the next slide, we'll be turning it back over to Karen, who's going to go over our historical aerial imagery.
Thanks, Irene. And yeah, by the way, that Fema study, I was looking at the methodology, and they didn't account for the geotubes. They actually made a note about that. So anywhere that there was coastal protection, they said, you know, we don't know in the future what's going to happen to this protection. So anything that was influenced, they kind of took it out and interpolated it. So So the geotubes are not reflected in those projections for that purpose. But as Irene was saying, you know, there's different tools for monitoring and measuring change over time. And so I thought it would be fun and engaging just to kind of look at, in Google Earth, there's kind of there's a timeline where you can go back to the earliest aerial imagery. It only went back to 1995. So I did go through the different archives that you guys have and saw on 1935 and 1940. You can see here that even back then, north of the geotubes, the beach was a lot narrower than to the south. So I thought that was interesting. And then moving forward to 1995, we start seeing like those houses we mentioned in the earlier slides, 93 and 97 Baxter Road. And then in the red arrows, I want kind of, if I flip forward from 1990, hold on. From 1995 to 2001, you can see that these homes with the north with the red arrows, you know, they're there in 1995, and then 2001, they've been demolished or relocated. The next slide is that they have in the Google timeline is 2008, and going out to 2010, again, there's a home that is demolished or relocated to the south. And actually, I found some pictures in your archives as well. It was moved, and it was 85 Baxter Road that was moved. So then we'll go to 2012. I'm trying to go real fast, but we're going to share this deck. 2012, again, you can see that the house from there we go. There's that 85 Baxter Road that's no longer there in 2012. And then here's two more homes that are there in 2012, and then they disappear in 2013. Fast forwarding to 2016 and 2017. So the most recent is 2018. And I think it's interesting to look at the difference between 2017 and 2018, like focus on the actual width of the shoreline, because you'll see that between 2017 and 2018, look in the top right corner, I'm going to click. Look at that. Isn't that a huge difference between 2017 and 2018? It's like when you go to eye doctor, right? So, and of course, you guys know what kind of year 2018 was. In your hazard mitigation plan, you know, Irene mentioned the previous storms. If you actually compare their water levels, you can see the 10 highest water levels, and that almost half of them are from 2018. Of course, 2 of them are on the same day. But that was definitely a very stormy year. So next, we're going to talk about the alternatives, and I'll hand it over to Irene.
Thank you, Karen. So Arcadis is slated to evaluate up to 5 different alternatives. I've got 4 listed here, and for all of these, the homeowner community outreach and standards of practice and best management practices would be combined with everything, with each one. So I'll describe these one by one moving forward. So I'll start with some bluff stabilization. And again, I want to express the interest of understanding the system as a whole, not just look at one piece of the puzzle, but look at the system in a holistic manner, because everything is related to one another. So it's good to have that comprehensive approach. So the idea here is to stabilize the bluff system, which includes the toe and the slope shape and the amount of vegetation covering the coastal bluff and the adjacent shoreline are all related to the susceptibility of the bluff face to ongoing erosion. The next one would be looking at sand nourishment or vegetation management. Nourishing the beach below the southern bluffs may provide some short-term benefits, and combining that with vegetation that's very common in other beach systems, to have that combination between adding material to the beach itself and then adding vegetation plantings that are appropriate for the environment in order to assist stabilizing the beach. In the long term, the beach nourishment will become more expensive as some of the sand sources are becoming limited. Moving forward, we've talked several times now during the talk of retreating and relocating the road and utilities. This is another thing to consider. erosion is going to continue, and we have to evaluate whether or not it's best to start to retreat from the shoreline. And I think the next slide will be describing some of the, oh, I'm sorry, no action. So leaving the natural shoreline undisturbed is often the least expensive option. And it's also something to be considered as part of this program. And the best management practices, again, is something that would be combined with all of the other alternatives as something to be considered from a homeowner standpoint, to think about diverting surface runoff away from the bluff. You don't want more material or more water running over the bluff to encourage and add to your erosion issues. Looking at shallow subsurface groundwater drainage, making sure that, again, more water isn't coming down the face of the bluff to, again, further encourage sediment removal. So in order, looking at all of these different alternatives, we need to have some sort of criteria to assess them. And that's really where things can get really creative, and we're really interested in working with you on this to define the purpose of it. What is the alternative intended to do? Having a straight-faced discussion. Okay, is this alternative actually solving the problems or addressing the problems? Considering the service life, and I'm really excited to hear some of the discussions on short and long-term perspective. And I think that's something that can absolutely be considered, because the coastal system works on short and long-term perspectives. Looking at the initial construction cost, your operations and maintenance costs moving forward, and how those might change in the future. As we've mentioned before, sand sourcing may become more expensive moving into the future. Constructability, any sort of issues that could impact the ability to actually construct the alternative, and any other feasibility issues, and absolutely not last but least, but environmental considerations. We don't want to create anything that would adversely impact endangered species, vegetation, or any other important habitats, such as the cobble nearshore habitat that we do know exists offshore. And I think now I'm going to turn it back over to Karen, who's going to go over the different perspectives. Karen?
Yeah, we're gonna do one more poll. Well, what I want to do is, and we were going to open up to discussion because we want to hear everybody's opinions and perspectives about the alternatives. But just to have everybody weigh in, there's this ranking poll that we can do, and it is anonymous. Like, this is just more for, don't overthink it. But basically, when I open the poll, if you click the different options, it's the 4, because the other one is going to be coupled, right? The management. So basically, you click one of the gray rectangles, and then a little up and down arrow will appear. So you kind of move everything up and down until you have the order that you like. So we're ranking from best to worst. So the best one is going to be on top, and the worst one is going to be on the bottom. Okay, so let's give it a try. And this is short term, okay? Because I know that, obviously some of these, if we said at 2,200 or 2,300, like what are the options? We're looking at just short term till 2070. Oh, this is great. You guys are fast. And so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do just like when we had you guys put in the ideas for the name for the project. We're going to have these anonymous, concerns. So out of the, look at the bottom one that you ranked, the one that you ranked the absolute worst, and think about make a note of this poll will say, even though I go to the next slide, you can complete it. So I just want to give the instructions for the last polling question, where you make a note of the one that you ranked as the worst. And so you can basically put the number. So whichever one you rank the worst, you put the number, so you don't have to type it out. Just put 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then just kind of summarize what your concerns are. What would happen? What are you worried about that could happen if we implement this alternative? So let's go back one more time. So we can see that no action was kind of ranked fourth for most people. So if you've ranked, if your concern was no action, so now you can say 4 and then just say why no action? What are the impacts of do nothing that you're most concerned about? Oh, good. And it's also in the chat. If you forgot the numbering, it's in the chat as well. And yeah, if you don't want to, if you have a concern in general, you can put that too. This is just more kind of very similar to what we did on the survey, just to make sure that you guys live there and work there, you know what the real concern should be. So we want to make sure that we cover them. Yeah, and I see that this last comment about bluff stabilization, you know, I can understand that one would be hesitant to rank it as a top just in case that the specifics of it, as Irene was talking about, managing the system, if it has to be done properly. That was the concern about where to relocate structures. That was a big topic in one of the March 23rd, some of the March 23rd meetings. Like the lots were sold in pairs. People used to be able to move their house to the other side of the road. And at this point, all of the available parcels are pretty far inland. So that was a good point. And if anyone, I see Holly raising your hand. We can, we only have a few slides left. We've done really great with time. We wanted to make sure that, we got all this information before 5, so we can really kind of open it up for discussion and be more, flow more. So yeah, go on, Holly.
I just wanted to mention about the lots. They technically weren't, the Baxter Road cut through the lots, and the intention wasn't for them to develop on the other side of the road. Now, since they've been developed, that's where we're running into that problem. So you'll find actually more of the historic structures are actually on the other side of the road.
They're on the landward side.
A lot of them are. I wouldn't say most, but I would say there's a good amount in certain locations. I think the beginning portion more towards historic Sconset were on both sides, but then as you got up more towards Sankaty, it wasn't intended for people to build on that side, my understanding.
Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it. Anyone else see a concern that they want to kind of talk through or discuss?
I was just going to ask Holly to expand on that. This is Jen Lockmeyer with Arcadis. I was going to ask Holly to expand on the historic structures. And then we might send you a map we're working on, Holly, and have you identify them for us.
I can do that, not a problem.
Thank you.
Oh, Ian has his hand up. Thanks, Ian.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Our house at 99 Baxter Road, which we bought in '62 when we came back from Europe, was the first lot that was split that I'm aware of. And I saw Holly nodding. I think from then on, they were all across the road. And in terms of historic structures, until you get down, and I can send this to you if you haven't got it from through Vince. Until you get down to lot 79, all the houses were basically, that still exist now, are post 1940. Our house at 99, which has been moved across and up towards the lighthouse, was built, I believe, in 29. But so, and one, if I may just add one other thing, in your PowerPoint slide, when Irene showed the PowerPoint slide, what are the Baxter Road geotubes, where it said that they protect 7 houses. It actually only protects 2 houses, as you referred to later, number 97 and 93. It protects 7 lots. Of those 7 lots, 5 are vacant. Thank you.
I think those were the 7. I think the 7 was, I'm pretty sure, was including the other side of the road.
Oh, there are a lot. Oh, well, then it would be more than 14. I can certainly, through Vince, send you some paperwork that would help clarify that.
Okay.
But
yeah, because I think counting along the tubes, because only for that stretch where the tubes are, I think I counted 2 houses on the seaward side and then 5 on the landward. But we'll double check that for sure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. And I think there was another question in the chat pertaining to sand nourishment and vegetation management and 2 different things. They definitely can be, and I like to, again, look at the beach as a system. If vegetation is not the way to go, or for whatever reason, whether it be a orientation issue or simply a geometry issue, if it's not going to provide any additional benefits, it's not something that we absolutely have to do. I just wanted to express the systems approach between looking at the beach. So I definitely hear you with they can be done in parallel or independent of one another. So I was really just speaking to the system approach, but thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that.
Well, it looks like the comments have slowed down. I'm glad that someone appreciates Vince. So the last few slides are about exploring perspectives. And so I just wanted to before, hopefully we can open it up to more discussion. But I know some people have to leave, but if, thinking about how to reach consensus again, we want to look at what is the type of risk that's acceptable, what are the losses that are acceptable, economic, cultural, environmental, from all those different perspectives. We heard a lot about the cobble and how it's important for the fisheries. So there's a lot of risks that we have to analyze and use those to prioritize, and also thinking about the consequences of each alternative and the consequences of doing nothing. So basically through all of that, we can work and find a way that works for everyone to focus on an alternative that's also technically feasible. And it is a challenge, but sea level rise in general is a challenge. And I really love this quote. I wanted to end on this quote from Albert Einstein, because sea level rise is this existential threat, like we saw on those maps. It hasn't happened in recorded history, and we're using we're using the same tools to solve problems that we used to create them, and that doesn't work. We shouldn't be reacting to things. Rather, we know what's going to happen, and so we can be preventative and prepare and plan. And the data shows that if you are preventative instead of reactive, you save a lot of money, time, effort. So there's a lot of motivation for that. And yeah, we just have some wrap up and next steps, and we can open it back up for discussion. Thank you, guys. And we will share the deck as well.
Yeah, and I would just say some of our next steps, we've heard from 2 groups already, and we've reached out to a couple people from each of those groups to start potentially, if they're willing, working with us on some joint problem statements. And we would love to select a person or 2 from the group of town folks to work with us on content and knowledge sharing, joint fact finding prior to the next set of focus group meetings. So we can all kind of come in with a into a positive space, and having worked through some of those key tensions that we're beginning to identify through this listening tour. So if anybody wants to proactively volunteer for that, feel free to send an email my way or throw your name in the chat. We'll be looking for anybody who's up for that challenge. Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in a quick response to Karen's counting the lots, there's the geotubes protect from 105 to 87 on the east side and from 106 to 90 on the west side. And that's 10 homes in total and 5 vacant lots. So, and I'll send you some of this stuff through Vince Murphy. So thank you very much. And I'm finding this very interesting and very helpful. Thank you so much.
We'll definitely adjust that in the deck and in our records. Thanks, Ian. Looking forward to the documents you'll send.
Anybody else have any comments right this minute? Or should I throw a question out there? Go ahead, Matt.
Just a quick comment. Sounds to me like Ian is volunteering.
Sure, I will. Good one, Matt. Happy to. Thank you.
Gary, did you have a question?
Yes, I don't understand what are there alternatives if any of the man-made solutions don't work and a new Baxter Road had to be created. Is there a possibility that it can be created? Are there any problems that will create the construction of a reimagined Baxter Road? I just don't know enough about that part of the island.
Yeah, I think that's one of our charges, is to figure out where it would go, what would move, what needs to go. And maybe you all have some answers in terms of, we have good GIS on water and sewer utilities within the road. Wondering where the telecommunications and electrical are located out there, if you all know. Ken, do you know?
No, unfortunately, I had another question.
That's okay. You guys can send it to me, or Vince may also help with that process as well, but I thought I'd throw it out to the group since it's a question that's something we've been looking at. So Gary, that's part of our challenge, is trying to figure out what a new Baxter Road would look like under sort of the retreat and relocate situation. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, what we've been talking about is a lot of the erosion around the toe, both south down towards the village and around the corner out towards Sacajawea Pond. My question is because of the distance away from the toe, is the erosion further south as we're heading toward the village less of a concern, or is it simply a function of timing as to when that gets to be attacked as much as the area around the toe has been attacked?
Thank you for that question, Ken. I'm in the process of still understanding the gross sediment transport pathways. I think I know a little bit about what you're talking about. I'm still trying to understand where the sand is moving in that gross capacity, where it generally moves, because I can see that there's movement to the north and there is movement to the south. So I'm trying to understand where that nodal point is and whether or not that nodal point moves. So that's something that I'm still working on understanding as to whether or not that is known. I don't know if it is yet, or at what level is the sediment budget? I do have some documentation regarding a sediment budget that was performed previously. And I think it's more of a conceptual level rather than really getting into, you know, whether or not 20,000 is going one way, 10,000 is going the other way. So I think that's a really great observation, and thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, my question is whether or not, what sort of impact that might have relative to the cost of addressing the issue of preserving or replacing Baxter Road, because of the fact that what we're concerned about is the fact that as the erosion up north is going, if it's eliminating Baxter Road, it's eliminating the town's ability to provide water and water and sewer and the other utilities. And so the scope of the concern is what my question is in terms of how can we identify that in terms of looking at the potential solution.
I think Kate can speak more to that than on the utility aspect.
Yeah, we're starting to look at that, and I think I may have an answer a little bit later in this process for you, Ken. I'm sorry if that's not the one you were hoping for, but we are starting to pull some of that together.
I think that's important to note, Kate, also, is that, you know, this is the first step, is collecting information and reaching out to you guys and understanding. We're not going to start doing the analysis or thinking about, you know, doing the work until we've actually presented it to you stakeholders, gotten feedback, made sure that we want to make sure that the results are useful, actionable, and that they will be we're doing this right now before we've done the work, so that you can inform the work, so that we can make sure that it brings the best result. So anything that, you know, you think can help us to make sure this is relevant and actionable, we're flexible, and we're kind of modifying our path forward based on your input right now and all of the stakeholders.
Holly, I think I saw you with your hand up earlier. I'm not sure if you still have a question.
I do, thank you. Kind of a little bit on to what Ken was talking about with the sediment transport. I'm curious if there was a study done that I'm not aware of, or the thought has gone across of looking at when Sacajah Pond is opened and not opened, and what that does with sediment going up and down the coast. Does that help with the erosion, or does it not? Obviously, we've been opening ponds on island for many generations with the Native Americans, and there's definitely benefits from multiple aspects, and I just figured that would be something to look into. Thanks.
Just thank you for that. Just for clarification, is that the one to the north, to make sure that I've got it straight in my head? Okay.
Yes.
I did actually just was reviewing one of the older documentation from NOAA in the 70s that looked at the breach cycle of it. And I know that there's been some other work on Monomoy and New Inlet up on the Cape. Its implications of that breaching process with the larger sediment transport, I don't have a good feel for right now. But what it does do in a general sense, when you have that breach, you're going to have material that's coming into the pond and creating essentially a flood shoal. So whether or not that's large enough to create an erosion or a sink someplace else, I'm not quite sure. I don't have a feel quite yet of how often it's open and for how long. I mean, if it's just a small little shoal, I don't really think it's having a huge impact right now, but I always hold to be corrected later on once I get more information. Did you have a follow-up question, Holly? I noticed you gestured.
I was actually going to say maybe Jeff Carlson knows it's open, twice a year. But I just thought that maybe that's something to look into if the sediment does hinder or help the erosion.
That's a really good observation. Thank you for bringing that up.
Irene, I can confirm that we open it in the spring and fall, and I'll get in touch with you offline and send you all the information we have.
Oh, thank you. Excellent, thank you. I look forward to that.
Well, Ian, I saw your hand up as well.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Madam Chair. So anecdotally, so the my background is Baxter Road, 99 Baxter Road during a 3-day nor'easter. All right. And that's, you can see and that's when there was a footpath and the bluff going down there. And oddly enough, my screensaver here is during a nor'easter where there's the overwashes coming right across into Sacajah Pond. And there was anecdotal evidence that during the 90s, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but during the 90s, there was a tussle between the state and the island as to who had jurisdiction over the ponds. And so they weren't open for roughly a decade. And during that period, there was anecdotal evidence that the erosion rate had increased. But my own personal observation was that there were more 3-day nor'easters as well. So I'm not sure that that doesn't muddy the waters rather than clearing up the issue. But there definitely is, there's quite a bit of sand is taken out initially. So, and Jeff will probably be able to clarify that. Thank you.
So I don't think I can confirm the exact dates where the opening ceased off the top of my head. I know I have records of that, but it did ultimately culminate in the town petitioning the state for a home rule petition to exempt themselves from local and state regulation on the opening of the pond. But again, I can compile all of that and send that to you probably in the next couple of days.
I'm not trying to add to your workload, Jeff, promise.
You always are, Ian. You always are.
And just for the purposes of record keeping, those documents, Jeff, will then be put into our document library, just so we have all that stuff. I did notice a comment in one of the polls regarding consideration of something offshore, like a wall or reef or other measures. And I just wanted to see if anybody is wanting to kind of add to that, add a little bit more detail around that, or talk about it. Also something you can reach out to us offline. And then the other thing I was going to ask, if you had to pick your second worst ranked option, are there concerns with that as well? Did you have a tie? Do you have other concerns about some of the other options? Because we honed in on the no action a lot, because I think it seemed like no action was maybe worse ranked for a lot of you, but wanted to capture concerns about other things if you have other concerns.
Kate?
Yes, Libby.
I raised my hand just to make one comment. I didn't put in the item about the offshore thing, but I just would comment that might be something to take a little bit of a look at, because that comes up all around the island periodically. And it's not just some kind of offshore reef. It's, sinking a ship or old cars or whatever in different areas. And I'm just going to go ahead and say there is an individual out there, Joe Farrell, who has tried things like this in other areas, says it works. It periodically resurfaces here, and there's not just the offshore idea, but there's put a structure in the sand and let it build up behind it, and pretty soon your dune will be rebuilt, kind of a thing. So I don't know what other people think about it. I would like to hear what they say, but I know that Joe has been to various boards in town to talk about this, and it might be something to investigate a little bit, to either put that to bed or not.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think we've kind of heard some ideas about if we could look at what's being done, across our knowledge base globally and nationally in terms of kind of innovative ways to build resilience, but also maybe really look at not impacting natural resources as much. And so we are bringing some of that together as well. Mary.
So I had submitted through Vince an article that I found, not an official scientific sort of document, but it had a history of erosion of the bluff. And the point that I think is really important, and I'm a little concerned that you might be missing it because you have a short time frame that you're looking back, is that the bluff hasn't been under constant threat of erosion. A few decades ago, it was pretty stable, and something changed was the point of the article. And the speculation that I remember hearing was that, an offshore sandbar had shifted, or something had changed offshore to create a greater hazard for the bluff. I wonder if there is more scientific information available. I don't know, but that might be useful for evaluating what options might work in an offshore environment.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. And I think I did receive that very recently from Vince. He forwarded that to me. So thank you. Libby, do you still have your hand up, or okay, just checking.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to take it down.
That's okay. I'm scrolling through 2 screens of people. So again, if we're not calling on you, just jump up and down in the chat somehow.
I think I can speak a little bit to Mary's comment on changing through time. So one of the documents, because I enjoy the historical thing, part of my research is looking at macro scale geomorphic change, like the big stuff on a regional scale, in response to basin scale, Atlantic basin scale variability. So basically the Atlantic's version of El Nino and La Nina. So that's my nerdy research, because I don't like leave my house. But there's a Nantucket Shoreline survey. I'm just looking to the right here. This was produced by NOAA, and it identified 4 different, 6 different time periods where they were looking at shoreline change and erosion from 1846 to 1887, 87 to 1955, 38 to 51, 1951 to 61, and then 61 to 70, which is, I believe, when this thing ends. So, and they were looking at the changes because in some time periods, at some portions of the shoreline, it accreted and then it eroded, and then it accreted and it eroded. So you have this shifting of what's, whatever is changing from a forcing perspective, that's changing, and it could be a forcing or a sediment sourcing perspective, as you had alluded to with the offshore bars, whether or not they're shifting or moving or migrating, or as sea level continues to rise, are the influence of those shoals going to have a change in influence on the shoreline as well. So that's why I get really excited about this type of thing, is looking at that changes through time and the changes in the forcing mechanisms. So thank you for mentioning that. And I will definitely review that other article, but there are some other scientific papers out there that are highlighting those changes.
All right. Other questions, comments, concerns, things we should know, things we got wrong? We're not afraid of that. You can tell us. No. All right. So another next step item is that tomorrow we will be in front of the select board, and we will be kind of reporting out what we've heard from all 3 groups. We have that coming up. And I'm curious if you all think that you have documents to add to the library, or if we're getting close to having everything. I know that some of you have looked at it and some of you have not. Sounds like we might be getting some more stuff from Jeff. But if any of you are sitting here thinking through things we may not have, and you want to kind of just flag that for us now, either in the chat or let us know of documents that you think maybe we don't have, it's another opportunity here to let us know. All right. Vince, any other questions on your end?
Not specifically. This is primarily for Select Board and Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, as well as town staff. So I just wanted to know if the Select Board had any specific questions, given that this was essentially, or ostensibly it is, a Select Board project.
Jason.
No questions, but I just wanted to say I really appreciate this process, and I feel like all of you from Arcadis are really professional, knowledgeable, and you understand the dynamics that we're dealing with environmentally, how complex it is politically, and it's just really nice to have this platform with you where we all can discuss different solutions. So I think it's really helpful. It's going to be helpful, and it is helpful. But it's going to help us move forward, and so it's been really nice to listen. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, and I think it's important to keep in mind that there will be compromise. I don't know. You may have heard Trevor on the CRAC meeting this morning talking about compromise. It's very true in this process as well. But I think if we can continue to approach this with some positivity and putting in the work, which includes, on our side and Vince and Jeff getting us all the documents they've gotten us already, and you all coming together with your input, but also when we start to work with the champions, as we're calling them, those people are sort of representative of the groups, but they're going to be going back to the larger group that they're responsible to sort of talk with. And so we're really asking you all to put in some work too. And I know that's kind of a different paradigm in a way, but if we're going to get to a solution that everyone can agree on, I think it's important that we're all fact finding and learning together. So if you're willing, we're willing. Oh, they're all masked up. You guys going somewhere? Somebody cool come in?
Cleaning staff.
Nice. So again, I think we have a couple of calls to action. The first is if you want to be a champion, thank you, Ian. You're already signed up, apparently. But if there's somebody else who's thinking about it, feel free to do that. The second is that we do need your documents addition forms by the 20th, because we're really hoping to wrap up sort of that existing information look. As we wrap up this listening tour, we want to move into the alternatives analysis in earnest. We've started to kind of put sort of a frame to that. We will be at the select board meeting tomorrow. That's going to be Jen and me. And I think those are kinds of the things we're looking at. We are willing to stay here till 6 o'clock if there's burning questions. I don't want to keep people who don't have sort of gotten what they need out of this today, but we are booked till 6, so you have us here if you would like to chat with us. If you don't wish to chat directly right now, my email is available. Vince can get it to you, and he has been doing a great job of passing things on to us as a team. So I will say, before we just kind of hang out here for a little bit, I'll say thank you for your time and your willingness to participate. The polls worked much better today than they have in the past. So you all did a great job with that, and it's important feedback, and we really appreciate it. Jason, I see that you have your hand up.
Thank you, Kate. I have to leave here in a couple minutes, so I just want to know if any other select board members were also going to leave, and we could adjourn at least our meeting, and then everyone can keep going. So Matt, Melissa, Christy, are you going to be leaving soon?
Yeah, it's Matt. I can stay and adjourn it either way.
Okay. All right, I'll take off, and Matt, if anybody else leaves, you can adjourn. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mary, I don't know if you have anything you need to do to formally document or end your meeting as well.
Yes, we will need to end our meeting. So I think all of our members are still here, all 7. But if somebody just wants to shoot me a chat message before they leave, just to give me a heads up, that would be helpful.
Excellent. I know that we'll be offering some more details around the alternatives analysis the next time we meet as a group. But I think we're always looking to improve, and talk through with you what works best for you as a community and as stakeholders. So if there's things that we can improve upon in terms of the presentation or facilitation, next time, feel free to shout those out to us too, because we'll try to incorporate that for next time. No, such a quiet group. Mary, go ahead.
I'll just do a little geological nitpicking. I noticed you said on one of the slides that what's happening now with the climate has not happened before in recorded history. Recorded human history, yes. Recorded geologic history, it definitely has happened before.
Yeah, and maybe I explained it incorrectly. I was trying to rush through that slide because I had a lot more to say about when that glacier retreated and how Nantucket formed, but I was trying to finish up by, we were trying to speed it up. But obviously before human recorded history, we have proxies, right? In the ice cores, there's bubbles, and there's like different things we can see in the ocean, like in the sediment, that tell us going back hundreds of thousands of years, what the CO2 concentrations were, right? What the temperature was. Then there's isotope proxies. There's all these ways that we figure out the past and what the correlation is. Obviously, we have more CO2 in the atmosphere. It traps more heat. Ice melts, sea level gets higher, right? So like that's obviously a very natural cycle going between glacial and interglacial. The rate at which it's happening in terms of since the Industrial Revolution, like in the increase in parts per million per year. And actually I had some, let me pull up the slide. I had some interesting, if we have a little extra time, there is more I wanted to talk about. Right now, our CO2 concentration is 410 parts per million. And we know through those proxies that during at least the last 800,000 years, the CO2 has not gotten higher than 300 parts per million. So in pre-industrial revolution, it was like 200. So we've gone from 200 to 410 in, a few hundred years. And that from what scientists can measure, that it hasn't happened that quickly. I mean, obviously, volcano erupts, there's a meteor, like there's been a lot of natural things that happen that cause really abrupt changes. But this type of increase in CO2, it hasn't been detected over Earth's history to happen so quickly. Obviously it's happened, but it hasn't happened, all over globally. The amount of CO2 that we're emitting from using electricity, transportation, like all of the contributions, right? Does that answer your question?
Does anybody have particular storm or event observations, just anecdotally, that you'd like to share in and around Baxter Road that we kind of didn't cover with moving homes and things like that, but things that you've observed, even just really recently, or before our sort of recent history timeline that we showed, which started in 2010.
Kate, it's
yes, Libby.
This is actually not something that I'm doing, but Jeff, are you and Rob still monitoring that narrow spot? And I don't know if that's information that's been given to them or not, but for some time now, there's that narrow spot that has been being measured, and it's been used as a kind of a, what is it, Jeff? A guide. If it gets to a certain point, it's a trigger.
Yes. So the short answer to that is we still measure a number of spots on there from the top of the bank to the roadway, kind of based on the initial guidance that we got from Malone and McBroom, that if we had a section that got within 25 feet of the roadway, that we had to take some substantial action. So that is stuff that if they haven't gotten that yet, we'll be sure that we get it to them in this latest round of information for all our measurements. But we do it at least once or twice a year, kind of pre and post storm season at kind of a minimum.
Great, thank you.
So yes, I can certainly, having watched it from Baxter Road from the 60s, and we lost nearly 300 feet And you know what is left of 99 Baxter Road now. And beforehand, it was an acre lot where you could play badminton. And then, well, I suppose I could send pictures, but I'm not sure how relevant it is at this point. But there was 90 steps going down to extensive dunes, and then another 15 steps going down to a wide beach. And it started really being noticeable, the erosion in the 70s. And it's always been the third day of nor'easters that has really done the damage. And in fact, that's what happened a few years ago here with the storm. Jeff, was it March of 2018? And we would regularly lose between 15 and 30 feet. I think 30 was the most, and not that. So these are estimations. I don't think we were ever quite down there with tape measures per se, but we certainly watched it with increasing dismay, obviously. So, and then in the last 15 years, I don't think, you know, there have been far fewer 3-day nor'easters, and so in some ways the erosion has slowed, I believe. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Oh, Gary has a
Gary,
question.
go ahead, Gary.
Hey, you know, just thinking about the conversation we've been having this afternoon, I think the conclusion you folks seem to have come to is probably correct, that the name of this project shouldn't be called a Baxter Road Feasibility Assessment, because we're talking about much less about moving Baxter Road and more about the broader other issues. Baxter Road is one possible area, but I think if the public, general public, looked at this and they saw the name Baxter Road Feasibility Assessment, and then they realized that there were so many other issues being considered here relating to the bluff and treating it, and that they'd say, well, why did they call it that? So I think it might be on the right track to rename this project.
That's an interesting point, Gary. I think we are considering the whole system from the road all the way down to the beach and out into the water, even with ecological issues that have been brought up. But I also think we have heard this theme running through this first round of focus groups where, you know, what kind of some of the decisions made here or the thought process here, some of the process we go through here has broader impacts for the island and connectivity to the coastal resilience plan and some of the kind of decisions that maybe need to be made in other areas in the future. So, Sarah.
Yeah, Kate, I thank you for recognizing me. I just want to follow up on what Gary said. Is I know that I was going to say this more to the select board members, that I know that there is some concern. I expressed this in our CRAC meeting about, you know, putting resources just to one neighborhood when we're already doing a full coastal resiliency plan. And so I think to Gary's point, renaming it to like fully encompass more of what it's actually encompassing, and that the results will have, you know, further implications for other neighborhoods potentially too, you know, like lessons learned here can kind of be applicable, and that you're working, you know, like it's in concert with the CRP. I think that will help. Even just the name will help answer could potentially answer a lot of the questions that will arise, and some people will get their hackles up immediately when they hear that, you know, so I think that just a little bit of different branding, even just the name. I don't have the magic name answer, but I think that would go a long way just for communicating for more of the scope of the project.
Awesome, thank you.
I mean, it's something like a pilot, right? Because it's like, you know, we started with this hot topic because there's some disagreement, and how can we, you know, use what we learned to set a precedent for other areas. Go on, Mary.
I just noting that, Matt, the select board seems to have lost a quorum. I think Jason and Melissa and Dawn have all left. So don't know if you have to do anything at that moment. The Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee still does have a quorum.
And no, we're fine, Mary. I don't think there's anything.
Excellent. I think as we look toward that that alternative that will pair with all the other alternatives we're looking at, so the standards of practice, best management practices that homeowners or the community can look at. Just wondering if what might be helpful to you in those types of you know, resources that we put together, if you're a homeowner or a community member considering what you could do to prevent erosion over the bluff through some of those like mitigating stormwater practices, things like that. And B, if you know of, you know, plants or species that are working for bluff stabilization in your community, things that are working, not working, things that would be helpful to have in those homeowner sheets. That's another place where we could get your input today and beyond. Looking at you, Sarah. No.
As the plant ecologist on the call, we were actually discussing within the crack committee as a future objective potentially would be for the island-wide to do vegetation recommendations for homeowners. And I hadn't thought specifically about stabilization, and that's not an area of expertise for me. I would just want to, I think my two general sense would be, you know, we would love to plant as native as possible. We would also really especially want to, and I think the Concom would be supportive of avoiding any invasive species, which are many of which are known for great soil stabilization, but as terrible plants to have on the landscape. And so I think there's multiple companies on island that have done it. I don't know if, I don't want to name names on a public meeting, but that have really great lists of plants that have worked in some areas for some private homes. So yeah, that's what I've got for now. I think yeah, just like kind of avoiding non-native species where possible, native where possible, but definitely not invasive plants.
Excellent. Matt, did you have a question?
Just a comment and observation from the crack meeting earlier today. Some of what we're doing, or all of it, is interrelated. We as a town have considered sort of alternatives for Baxter Road, and part of that was coming in off of Pulpus Road and having some fingers come in and reach the houses from the opposite side. That was, you know, stuff we've discussed. But then we're in the crack meeting today, and you look at sort of the roads that are in peril at 2030, 2050, and Pulpus Road is one of the roads that's going to be underwater regularly. So, you know, so we really, it's hard to talk about, you know, just one location. So I'm glad, you know, we need to, it's good that we're doing this the way we're doing this and focusing here, but it's going to have, you know, impacts, and what we can do here or how we handle it here is going to be influenced and vice versa by the other places.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of keep the big picture in mind too. And we are actively involved in working, coordinating efforts with the CRP team as well. So it's great. We'll pull in resources from them, and you may see some of our homeowner sheets, you know, end up in the CRP. So some of those kinds of things may cross-pollinate as appropriate. Another thing that came up was beach access and walking pathways access and access to the lighthouse, and just wondering about those sorts of public access and amenity type things that are in this area, and if you all have some concerns or questions or thoughts on that. No. I did see that there was some safety considerations in terms of, if the road falls in and things like that, but I see Matt had his hand up, so I'll let you speak, Matt.
I wasn't going to comment much because I have another crack at it tomorrow night with you guys. But no, I'm surprised. I've gone out a couple of times, Baxter Road at different times of the year, and I'm surprised at the number of people who use it, walking, running, walking with their families. And it's a very important aspect. I mean, we'll talk about walking into town. He's talked about walking into town, when he was younger, and so I think whatever we do there, we want to try to keep that, those uses and rights in place. When you do the deed research and you look at how how that was written, it was understood that there'd be a path and that it would move, as the erosion happened. It was in the original, some of the original deeds. So it's an important aspect for the island.
Yeah. So Matt, would it be fair to say that it's sort of a valued resource for the whole community then, not just those who live there?
Yeah, I would say so, yes. And continued access is valued.
Excellent. All right. We have about 15, 20 minutes left. Just looking at another aspect we look at is, policy, regulatory pieces, zoning. Are those, does anybody have thoughts or concerns about this area and policy considerations, I guess? Even historic, I know if there's historic structures there, Holly, if you have historic preservation type concerns that may be being overlooked here, or, we went too fast over that piece, feel free to jump in.
I can provide more information to you. I sent you in Vince an email with just the basic MACRIS MHC survey information. But of course, that's only what they have on file. Doesn't reflect any structures that may have been moved, because there have been obviously or demolished, or had to be demolished because of the erosion itself. But I think understanding what is in that location that you all are focusing from Blueberry to looks like Sankaty itself, I think that would be beneficial to understand, because again, I'm concerned on if the town's going to come from a perspective of requiring relocation of structures, where do they go to? From a historic perspective, the entire island is a National Historic Landmark and a local district, so it wouldn't necessarily lose its integrity to the district because the entire island is. But obviously, once you move a structure out of its context and its setting, that can hinder. So are we talking about moving structures to Nantucket? I'm just using that as an example, or Mid-Island. Those are things to look into, and as well as the fact that we don't have that much buildable land. So I just think that those are imperative to look at from that perspective, as well as property rights. Where are these people going to want to move their structures to? So I just think there's a lot of different things to look at, but knowing the history of it is important.
Yeah, and I know the idea of maybe something out in the water, there has been a consideration of maybe the lighthouse being out in the water eventually, either because the land is eroding around it or because it gets moved out there once again. If that were on the table, is that a historic concern there, or?
I would refer you all to Descanset Trust. They're the ones who paid for that effort.
Yeah.
That was a big effort that happened, I think, in 2007. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it was obviously recorded. It was, I think you could actually watch it on one of the nationwide moving shows. But yeah, is that something that is going to happen again? I think that would be taken into consideration. Would Sankaty Gulf be willing to provide some additional land from their Gulf? I don't know, but that's definitely something to look at.
Yeah, and I noticed as we're looking at the alternative of moving the road or even retreat of houses, if there is land a little bit more inland, you know, there are, in addition to the ocean and the resources that are out off of the coast, there's also resource areas inland and habitats inland. So Sacagawea Pond and even just like little intermittent streams and wetlands that surround those. So just thinking about those areas and whether there's room, and just running into what we see on the maps, but I don't know if there's things that may be missing from those sort of DEP wetlands layers, Jeff or Vince, that will run a map by you. But if anybody else wants to take a look at that and knows more about that, we're happy to pass that through you too.
We can pull that together as well. And
Excellent.
help you with that map.
Cool.
Fritz had his hand up.
Oh, Fritz.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Not that I have any expertise or knowledge of it at all, but as we were talking about the lighthouse, it's important, obviously, that everybody know and understand, and I don't even know the answer as to whether the lighthouse is a historic, it is certainly a historic building in terms of time, but is it simply a historic building, or is it a valuable and presently used navigational aid? And to the extent it's the latter, or among other things, the latter, then you have to take into account what moving it would mean. So in other words, if you start moving it towards the golf course, that's downhill. And to the extent the bluff still exists and you're moving the lighthouse downhill, you're obviously affecting the heights of the lighthouse, and therefore presumably affecting its value as a navigational aid. So I'm just throwing all of that out there. I'm sure that's something you're probably taking into consideration, but certainly the lighthouse is a very significant structure for a lot of reasons, you know, on that road. Maybe more significant than the houses, you know, but in my mind, but anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Kate, to answer Fritz there, just by looking at the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information System, Sankaty Head Lighthouse is listed as significant to the district under, believe it or not, archaeology, historic architecture, engineering, military, and politics government. So it is listed.
All the things.
Yes.
Check all the boxes. Go ahead, Mary.
I was doing some research into Sankaty last night, and what I was seeing was that it was listed as an active aid to navigation. I couldn't settle the question of whether it was officially an aid to navigation or just in use, in common use as an aid. I do remember that there was a question many years ago about whether it would be decommissioned, and there was an outcry locally that no, we definitely do use it and need it. I don't remember what the exact outcome of that discussion was, whether it was continued to be under official, federal designation, or if it had some other status conferred to it. The Coast Guard does maintain the lights. The Sconset Trust owns the structure and the land. So it's definitely in use. The question is, what category of use is it in?
Just to chime in here, I happen to have the navigation chart open. It is listed as an official aid to navigation with its flashing at 7.5 seconds. I believe that's what it means. It's been a little while since I've looked at this type of chart. So if it's listed on there, and my experience having other aids to navigation be established, if it's on the chart, it's an official designation as a navigational aid. So, and there is another flashing light at the end of Great Point, but that's the only navigational aid in a visual sense that I do see. This particular chart happens to have the Loran Towers listed as well, and I don't know if there's a flashing light. It's not listed on here, so that's something to be aware of. Thank you for bringing that up, Mary.
I just sent the HDC survey actually from MHC to Kate, so she has that.
Thank you. I guess in terms of either historic or zoning or ecological types of things, has the town have a history of approving overlay type districts or conservation restrictions in certain areas that, you know, may be a consideration as we look into certain alternatives here? Holly.
I don't want to, it looks like Andrew has left. I don't want to speak for him, but I'm pretty sure, and maybe Fritz, you could correct me if I'm wrong, that the master plan, we're trying to phase out overlays. The island's so big from a planning perspective, you know, overlays, you either change the zoning or you modify the zoning bylaw to reflect things. So I don't think that that would be something looked too heavily on, but that's just my understanding.
Thanks, Holly. Matt.
Yeah, I'll take I think if it's something that we should be considering, if we should be saying, you know, don't make the existing situation worse in these areas. And the proper way to do that is an overlay. I think you should recommend it. I don't think we should be hesitant to do that. I mean, one of the things that came up at a meeting I thought was really a recent, I'm not sure if it was one of the resiliency, it doesn't matter. They were saying the first thing you have to do is sort of slow down. You don't want to make things worse. You know, you don't want to be like adding more into these areas, you know, and then trying to fix it. So, you know, your first step of, you know, of sort of moving, first step of retreat is to not make it worse while you're retreating. So if you have ways to do that, strategies to get there, I think you should include them and let us try to sort it out.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. So I think we have a few minutes left. I just want to repeat the call to action being, you know, we need your resources. We are looking for a potential volunteer champion, or may reach out to some of you to ask if you're willing. And then just if there's anything beyond this meeting today that you feel like you didn't get to say, we have, you know, you can reach out to Vince and he can get an email off to our team, or you can reach out to one of us directly. I think that's everything, and we'll be seeing some of you tomorrow at the select board meeting. And I see Mary has her hand up. She needs to do her ending to her meeting. I will just say one more thing. For our select board meeting tomorrow, we have sort of a very summary slide deck, and we're going to try and incorporate some of the feedback we've heard today into that meeting. But this workshop setting is much more in depth, and the concerns that you've shared with us was a little bit more in depth. The discussions today were a little bit more in depth. The select board meeting, Matt, for your benefit, any others who are on the select board tomorrow will be more of an overview to make sure the community is hearing what's going on, and that you are all apprised of like the progress we've made. So that's more the tone of tomorrow, just so you all know. All right, Mary, I'll let you do your thing.
Can I get a motion to adjourn from one of the committee members?
So moved.
Thank you, Matt. Fritz, you're muted. Do you want a second?
Second.
Thank you. And a roll call vote. Gary's told me he had to leave. Sarah's icon is still up, but she did tell me she had to leave. Sarah, are you there? Okay, I don't think so. Graham? Motion to adjourn. Matt?
Aye.
Ian?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
And Mary Longacre, aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Excellent. Thank you all for your time today. Don't be afraid to reach out. And I don't know if Vince has anything else to close.
Just to say thank you and well done to Arcadis and everyone for attending, and CRAC for bringing in quorum, and for Select Board for bringing in quorum, and to all town staff for staying well past finishing time. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.